A disabled woman carefully enters a quiet café, crutches tapping softly against polished tile. A wealthy couple laughs loudly, shifting casually as she passes too close. Without warning, a shove sends her crashing down, coffee spilling, silence swallowing the room. People stare, frozen, as humiliation spreads across the floor beside her. The doorbell chimes, and a powerful German shepherd walks in, calm, alert, watching everything. Behind him follows a Navy SEAL, composed, eyes scanning the injustice unfolding inside. The dog steps forward like a barrier, drawing a line no one else dared draw. In that moment, cruelty meets consequence, and the room is forced to choose sides. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. The sound that broke the cafe wasn't loud. It was wrong. A sharp crack, followed by the scrape of metal across tile, then silence. A woman lay on the floor near the counter, one crutch twisted beneath a chair, the other spinning slowly before stopping. Her breath came in shallow bursts, eyes wide, fixed on the ceiling lights as if they'd shifted without warning. Coffee dripped from an overturned cup, spreading across the floor toward her sleeve. Someone laughed. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't accidental. It was casual, almost bored. "You really should watch where you're going," a man said, his voice smooth, amused. His wife leaned back in the booth, crossing her arms, lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. Around them, people froze. A barista gripped the counter too tightly. A fork hovered midair. No one spoke. No one moved. The woman on the floor tried to push herself up. Her arms shook. Pain bloomed late, sharp and humiliating. She reached for her crutch and missed. That was when the bell above the cafe door chimed. Soft, ordinary, a sound that didn't belong to what was happening. 10 minutes earlier, the cafe had been forgettable. Warm lights, muted chatter, the kind of place people pass through without leaving anything behind. The woman had chosen it for that reason. Her name was Rachel Cole, 38. She'd learned to move carefully since the accident, every step measured, every surface assessed. Independence had become a skill instead of a given. She hated attention, hated needing space, hated being noticed. She ordered tea, sat near the wall, positioned her crutches so no one would trip. She waited until her hands stopped shaking before standing to leave. The couple arrived laughing, loud enough to bend the room around them. Designer clothes, easy confidence. They didn't look at anyone when they sat. The man stretched his legs into the aisle without checking. The woman scrolled her phone, smiling at something no one else could see. Rachel adjusted her grip and took a step. The man's legs slid out. Not far. Not obvious. Just enough. Her crutch caught. Balance vanished. The floor rose fast. Now, on the tile, Rachel felt eyes on her like weight. She heard the laugh again. She knew, with a quiet certainty, that this wasn't an accident, and that no one was coming to help. Rachel forced air into her lungs and lifted her head. Her knee screamed. Her shoulder burned. She swallowed the sound that wanted to escape. "You did that," she said, her voice thin but steady. The man looked down at her, surprised she'd spoken at all. "Did what?" "You tripped me," she said. "You stuck your leg out." His wife snorted. "Oh my God. Are you serious?" Rachel pushed herself upright, shaking, pain now sharp enough to blur her vision. She met the man's eyes. "Apologize." The word hung in the air, fragile and exposed. The man stood, towering over her. "You don't get to talk to me like that." He shoved her. It wasn't hard. It didn't need to be. Rachel fell again, this time flat, her elbow slamming into tile. The sound echoed. Someone gasped. Someone else turned away. The woman laughed openly now. Unbelievable. Rachel lay there, staring at the floor, heat flooding her face. She felt small, reduced, like something broken. People stepped around. Then the room changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, just enough to make the laughter stop. The German shepherd entered first. Large, controlled. His paws made almost no sound as he crossed the threshold. His eyes locked onto the center of the room, assessing, measuring. A low, steady rumble vibrated in his chest, felt more than heard. Behind him walked his handler. Tall, broad, still in a way that felt deliberate. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He took in the scene with practiced calm. Woman on the floor, crutch out of reach, man standing too close, fear sitting heavy in the air. The dog moved between Rachel and the man, placing his body like a wall. No teeth, no bark, just presence. The woman in the booth shrieked, scrambling back. Get that thing away from us. The man stepped back despite himself, color draining from his face. The handler knelt beside Rachel. His voice was low, steady. Don't move yet. Let me check you. His hands were careful, precise. Not rushed, not hesitant. Rachel looked up at him, stunned. Not by his size, but by the way he saw her. Not as a problem, not as a scene, as someone worth protecting. Behind them, the dog held his ground. And for the first time since she fell, Rachel believed the room might finally do the same. The café didn't erupt, tightened. Rachel felt it before she saw it. The way shoulders stiffened, the way breath held. The man who'd shoved her glanced around, suddenly aware that attention had shifted away from him and onto the dog standing inches from his knees. I didn't do anything, he said quickly, too quickly. She fell. The handler didn't answer. He finished checking Rachel's arm, then her knee, his touch light but exact. Sharp pain or dull? He asked. Both, she whispered. He nodded once. Okay, stay with me. He reached for her crutch, placing it within reach, then positioned his body just enough to shield her without making a show of it. The movement was subtle, instinctive. The man scoffed. You can't just bring an animal in here and threaten people. That was when the dog's growl deepened. Not louder, just firmer. A warning, not an attack. The handler finally looked up. His eyes were calm, flat. Step back. Something in his voice made it less a request than a boundary. The man hesitated, pride wrestling fear. His wife tugged at his sleeve. Let's just go. Instead, he reached into his pocket. Metal flashed. The knife wasn't large. It didn't need to be. It caught the light as it cleared the man's pocket. A casual, reckless movement meant to intimidate. Someone screamed. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Rachel's breath caught. Her hands clenched uselessly against the tile. The dog didn't move forward. He moved up, head lowering, muscles coiling, eyes locked with frightening precision. The growl stopped. Silence replaced it, the kind that comes right before something breaks. Put it away, the handler said, his voice quiet now. The man laughed, high and strained. You think I'm scared of you? He lunged, not at the handler but at the dog. What happened next was fast, but not chaotic. The handler stepped in, catching the man's wrist mid-swing, twisting with controlled force. Bone popped. The knife clattered onto a table, spinning before dropping into a plate. The man screamed. The handler guided him down, pinning him against the booth, forearm between shoulder blades, pressure exact and merciless. Don't, he said softly. Make this worse. The dog stood inches away, unmoving, eyes alert. Rachel watched, stunned. Not by the violence, but by how carefully it was contained. The cafe doors burst open minutes later. 2 officers entered, hands already near their belts. One of them, older, scanned the room and locked onto the man pinned in the booth. Evan? He said. What happened? The man groaned loudly. He attacked me. That guy and his dog. The handler stepped back slowly, hands visible. He pulled a knife. The older officer didn't look at the knife, didn't look at Rachel on the floor. His eyes stayed on the handler. Is that so? Rachel tried to speak. Ma'am, the officer said without turning. Sit tight. The handler said nothing. He gave a single quiet command. The dog sat instantly, posture perfect. The younger officer hesitated, eyes flicking between Rachel and the knife on the table. Sir, witnesses. Enough, the older officer snapped. Cuff him. Metal clicked. Rachel's stomach dropped as the handler's wrists were pulled behind his back. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He met Rachel's eyes once. Steady. It's okay, he said. But nothing about this felt okay. They took him out first. The dog followed, obedient until the leash was yanked from the handler's hand and passed to animal control waiting outside. The separation was quiet. Worse than shouting. Rachel was helped into a chair at last, though no one met her eyes. Statements were taken quickly, selectively. The man with the knife sat wrapped in concern, his wife crying loudly into a tissue. Rachel spoke anyway. She told them what happened. All of it. The older officer nodded without listening. When they left, the café felt hollowed out. Rachel sat alone long after, staring at the door. Guilt pressed heavy against her ribs. He'd stepped in because of her. And now he was gone. Outside, sirens faded. Across town, in a holding room that smelled like disinfectant and old regret, the handler sat calmly on a metal bench. His name was Daniel Cross, Navy SEAL, recently returned, recently invisible. He stared at the wall, already understanding the shape of the trap closing around him. Power didn't shout. It waited, and it had just noticed him. Daniel had learned long ago that waiting rooms were battlefields of a different kind. No noise, no movement, just time pressing in. The holding room's fluorescent light hummed faintly above him. His wrists were free now, but the absence of cuffs didn't mean freedom. It meant paperwork. Decisions made elsewhere. People with cleaner hands. A young officer came in once to take his name, rank, serial number. Paused when he read it. Looked up, uncertain. Then left without comment. Hours passed. Daniel slowed his breathing the way he'd been trained. He replayed the café in fragments. Rachel's fall, the knife, the officer's eyes sliding past the truth. None of it surprised him. Power rarely looked like force. More often, it looked like indifference wearing a badge. The door opened again. This time, a man in a tailored jacket stepped inside. No uniform, no hurry. He closed the door carefully behind him and sat across from Daniel like they were meeting for coffee. My name is Thomas Reed, the man said. I represent people who don't enjoy attention. Daniel said nothing. Reed smiled thinly. This goes away if you let it. Charges dropped. Dog returned. You leave town. And Rachel? Daniel asked. Reed's smile faded. She's not part of this conversation. That was the moment Daniel knew it wouldn't end quietly. Rachel didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the shove again, heard the laugh, saw the dog step between her and the floor like a living wall. She replayed Daniel's calm voice, the way he'd said it's okay like he believed it. Morning brought consequences. A notice was taped to her apartment door. Building inspection. Immediate. Her landlord wouldn't meet her eyes when she called. I'm sorry, he said too quickly. They made it clear. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You should reconsider your statement, the message read. This doesn't need to get messy. Rachel's hands shook as she set the phone down. She stared at her crutches leaning against the wall. At the quiet space she'd fought so hard to keep. Across town, Daniel was released on bail he hadn't asked for. Conditions were strict. Travel restricted. Silence expected. He walked out into sunlight feeling the leash even without cuffs. The dog was not returned. That hurt more than the cell. Rachel and Daniel met that evening by accident, or maybe not. He was waiting outside her building, leaning against a fence, posture relaxed but eyes alert. "They're pressuring you," he said. She nodded. "They think I'll fold." He looked at her carefully. "Will you?" Rachel straightened, pain flaring, resolve sharper. "No." Daniel exhaled once. "Then we do this the hard way." The hard way didn't involve shouting. It involved patience. Daniel made calls he hadn't wanted to make. Old teammates, quiet professionals who owed him nothing but answered anyway. People who understood leverage without explaining it. Rachel met with a lawyer who listened more than he spoke. An older man, local, unimpressed by money. He watched the cafe footage taken on phones from across the room. Partial, shaky, incomplete, but enough to raise questions. "Truth's there," he said. "Just buried." Pressure increased. Rachel's job interview was cancelled. Her landlord stopped returning calls. A car idled too long outside her building one night. Daniel noticed. Always noticed. He walked her home when he could. Not touching. Not hovering. Just present. One evening, as they sat on a bench watching traffic, Rachel asked quietly, "Why didn't you walk away?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "Because I've walked away before," he said finally. "And I remember the faces I left behind." The case moved forward despite resistance. Depositions scheduled. Names surfaced. One officer transferred suddenly. Another stopped answering subpoenas. Someone made a mistake. A security camera across the street from the cafe, overlooked, misfiled, surfaced during a routine audit. The footage was clean, clear, unarguable. When Daniel's lawyer watched it, he smiled for the first time. "Let them explain this," he said. The courtroom felt smaller than Rachel expected. Wood paneling, hard benches, air heavy with expectation. The couple sat across the aisle, polished and confident, their lawyer whispering reassurances. Daniel sat beside Rachel, hands folded, expression neutral. The dog was absent. The space beside him felt wrong. The footage played. No commentary, no spin, just truth. The legs sliding out, the fall, the shove, the knife, the dog stepping in. Daniel's restraint. The order of events laid bare. Silence followed. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp now. Questions were asked. Answers stumbled. Authority shifted. Charges against Daniel dissolved quickly after that. Apologies followed, awkward and insufficient. The couple left without looking back. Outside, the sky was wide and bright. Rachel breathed deeply, like someone learning a new rhythm. Daniel stood beside her, free but changed. "They'll never really pay," Rachel said. "No," he agreed, "but they won't forget." Animal control returned the dog that afternoon. The reunion was quiet. A press of fur against Daniel's leg. A single thump of a tail. Rachel watched, smiling softly. Justice hadn't been loud, but it had arrived. The days after the hearing didn't feel victorious. They felt exposed. Rachel learned quickly that justice didn't restore what pressure had taken. Her landlord still avoided her. The job never came back. Friends who'd promised support grew quiet once the headlines faded. Survival returned to being a private task. Daniel noticed the change in her posture before she mentioned it. The way she paused longer before standing. The way she scanned rooms like exits mattered again. "They don't like losing," she said one afternoon as they sat on a low seawall near the harbor. "They just stop pushing publicly." Daniel nodded. Power adapts. His dog lay between them, relaxed but alert, ears flicking at every sound. Daniel watched people pass. Tourists, joggers, families, ordinary lives moving uninterrupted. He wondered how many times he'd fought so others could have that illusion. Rachel broke the silence. "You could leave now. I know. You don't owe me anything." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He reached down, scratched the dog's neck, grounding himself. "This isn't about owing," he said. "It's about finishing." That night, someone shattered the window of Rachel's car. Nothing stolen. Just a message. Daniel stood in the street afterward, hands on hips, breathing slow. They want fear, he said. Rachel met his eyes. They won't get it. The retaliation escalated quietly. An anonymous complaint delayed Daniel's military clearance review. A blog post questioned his mental stability. Rachel's disability benefits were suddenly under reassessment. Each move was small, legal, plausibly deniable. Together they formed a pattern. Daniel documented everything. Dates, times, names. He taught Rachel how to do the same, not as a victim but as a witness. Control returned in increments. One evening, Daniel's phone rang. A blocked number. "You should have taken the deal," a voice said. Calm, educated, familiar. Daniel didn't respond. "You don't belong here," the voice continued. "People like you disrupt order." Daniel smiled faintly. Order built on fear isn't order. The line went dead. 2 days later, federal investigators arrived unannounced at the café. Not for the incident, but for unrelated audits. Tax discrepancies, safety violations, ownership structures that didn't quite align. Pressure shifted direction. Rachel watched from across the street as officials entered the building, clipboards in hand. She felt something unfamiliar loosen in her chest. "They're turning on each other," she said. Daniel nodded. "They always do." That night, for the first time in weeks, Rachel slept without waking. The call came before dawn. Daniel stood on Rachel's porch, uniform bag at his feet, the sky still bruised with night. Orders were orders. Leave was over. The world hadn't stopped just because one corner of it had been corrected. Rachel stepped outside slowly, wrapped in a sweater, cane steady in her hand. She already knew. "They need you," she said. Daniel nodded once. "They always do." The dog sensed it too. He stayed close, pressing against Daniel's leg, grounding him. "I don't know how long," Daniel said, "or when I'll be back." Rachel looked out at the quiet street. "You came back once." He studied her face, memorizing details he didn't trust memory to keep. "You'll be okay?" She straightened. "I didn't break because of them. I won't bend because of them either." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn patch. Faded, earned. He pressed it into her palm. "Hold on to this," he said, "until I can." Rachel closed her fingers around it, feeling the weight of trust. The sun began to rise, soft and indifferent. Daniel clipped the leash. "Ready." The dog looked at Rachel, then sat, tail thumping once. Goodbye didn't need words. After Daniel left, life didn't become easier, but it became clearer. Rachel found work at a small nonprofit. Quiet, patient people who didn't rush her or look away. She learned new rhythms, different strengths, progress measured in weeks instead of seconds. The cafe changed owners. No announcement, no apology, just new paint and quieter patrons. Sometimes, Rachel walked past it and felt nothing at all. Daniel sent messages when he could. Short, sparse, alive. The dog's presence lingered even in absence. Muddy paw prints on memory. A reminder of what protection looked like when it wasn't performative. Months later, Rachel stood at the same seawall, wind off the water sharp against her face. She moved without thinking now. Not perfectly, but freely. A familiar figure approached from behind. Taller, leaner. Still, she didn't turn right away. "I kept it," she said softly, holding up the patch. Daniel stopped beside her. "I knew you would." They stood together watching the horizon. Some battles end loudly. Others end by changing who you are allowed to be. This one had done exactly that. Daniel didn't stay long after returning. That was the unspoken rule of his life. Arrive quietly, leave the same way. The world he moved in didn't reward roots, punished them. Still, he made time. He walked Rachel to her physical therapy sessions when schedules aligned. Sat in the corner, silent, while she pushed through pain without complaint. He never coached, never corrected. He understood that recovery wasn't something you supervised. It was something you respected. One afternoon, Rachel stumbled during a balance drill. She caught herself before falling, breath sharp, jaw clenched. She laughed afterward, surprised. "That would have wrecked me a year ago," she said. Daniel nodded. "You didn't quit then either." She looked at him. "I wanted to. I know." They didn't talk about the café anymore, or the couple, or the case. The past had done its work and stepped aside. What remained was quieter. Daniel fixed a loose railing on her porch. Rachel learned how to drive longer distances again. Small things, real things. On his last night in town, they sat on the steps, watching the streetlights hum on. "You changed things," Rachel said. Daniel shook his head. "You did." She didn't argue this time. Daniel left before sunrise. No ceremony, no promises, just a nod, a handshake that lingered half a second longer than necessary. The dog followed him without looking back, trained to move forward when commanded. Rachel stood alone on the porch long after the truck disappeared. Life continued. She found herself correcting people less, apologizing less, making space where she needed it instead of shrinking. The world didn't suddenly become kind, but it became manageable. Months passed. One evening, Rachel returned home to find a package on her doorstep. No return address. Inside was a photograph, grainy, sun-bleached. Daniel somewhere far away. The dog beside him, both alive. On the back, one sentence, "Still holding the line." Rachel smiled and placed the photo on her shelf. She walked without the cane most days now. Not because she didn't need it, but because she no longer feared needing it again. Strength, she'd learned, wasn't about standing alone. It was about knowing when someone else had your back, even if they were already gone. The café incident faded into local memory, replaced by newer scandals, louder ones. Names changed, faces rotated, power found new disguises. But something subtle remained. People intervened faster now, spoke up sooner. The pause between cruelty and consequence shortened, just slightly. Rachel noticed it once, at a bus stop, when a man mocked an older woman for moving too slowly. Someone else stepped in before Rachel could. She didn't need to act. That was the difference. She still carried the patch Daniel had given her, tucked safely in a drawer. Not as a symbol of him, but of herself. Of the moment she chose not to disappear. Some nights she dreamed of the café. But the ending was always different now. She stood. The room stood with her. No hero needed. No dog between her and the world. Just space. Dignity. Breath. Justice, she understood, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about permission to exist without fear. Years later, Rachel told the story only once. Not to dramatize it. Not to inspire. Just to explain why she didn't look away anymore. She never mentioned names. Never described uniforms. She focused instead on details people could feel. The sound of a crutch on tile, the weight of silence, the relief of someone choosing to step forward. When she finished, the room stayed quiet. That was enough. Somewhere else, Daniel continued doing what he'd always done. Moving through danger. Holding lines no one saw. Leaving places better than he found them. They didn't stay in touch. They didn't need to, because what passed between them wasn't meant to last forever. It was meant to last long enough. And sometimes that's all it takes to change the direction of a life. Some moments don't announce themselves as turning points. They arrive quietly, disguised as injustice, waiting to see who will stand. If the story stayed with you, consider subscribing, liking, and turning on the bell icon. And if you feel moved, share where you're watching from or what this story meant to you in the comments.